All right, teammates, we are back once again. If this is your first time listening to the Move Swiftly podcast, welcome to the show. Welcome to the #1 show on innovative teamwork. We come at you every single day, new episodes daily. We do not stop. We do not stop. We do not stop. So thank whoever brought you here. To my regular listeners, you know what we're about. You already you can say it before I say it. The expectation is we bring people on that have incredible stories, that have incredible messages, and are here to serve you. Today, I have Aaron Guyett, founder of Leaders of Leaders, who has a absolutely magnificent story that is all rooted in a deep faith, all rooted in a love for God, and wears it on his sleeve, is bold and is not afraid or ashamed at all to talk about how much he loves Jesus Christ. And people like that, man, always have a seat on this show. So with all that, man, Aaron, welcome to the show, man.
Man, thank you so much, Asman. It's my pleasure and honor.
Yeah, so like I was telling you, I've been listening to you and several other shows, and you are incredibly transparent about everything that you've gone through from young to leading people in the Marines and what you've gone through in high school and things like that. And I think that the best place to start this off would be speak on some of like me, I'm a football guy. I played football from 7 years old all the way to 21, and you actually were in high school and you were very insecure and you developed some confidence, and then you went out for the teams and sports teams and like that. So it's kind of a different place, but we both still kind of landed in the fitness world. So one of the things that I think the best place to start would probably be just talk a little bit about your experience in school and how you were what you were going through there, and we'll kind of go from there.
Yeah, I basically I ran for fun. Interestingly, I got asked to do cross country. I got asked to do track because my times during PE were basically I was beating everybody in the mile,
Right. And
and
this
I was
was
like,
in
nah.
Idaho, correct?
Yeah, this is in North Idaho. And yeah, and in high school, and I was like, nah, that's all good. I just run for fun. I
Mhm.
run because I love to do it. But I love playing soccer, and I played soccer all throughout. I played hockey, which was like outside of high school.
Mhm.
But yeah, I basically misstepped in my junior high years and
Mhm.
didn't go out for football. So ended up, I was like, what am I thinking? What is this all about? This isn't about like having a certain friend group or being
Mhm.
like right timing or something like that. And so I laid it all out. I was like, no, I'm just gonna go. I'm gonna do the sports that I've always wanted to do. So I went out for football. I ended up breaking my arm about a quarter of the way, third of the way through the season,
Mhm.
and healed up my arm, and then went out for wrestling, and then ended up going to regionals my first year
Yeah.
trying it, and
Right.
which isn't super incredible. I mean, state would have been obviously incredible in Idaho, but the thing is, it's like, man, what was I thinking? And so it was at that point that I realized, well, I always wanted to join the Marine Corps. And then I decided, okay, well, I'm just going to join the Marine Corps then, whether my parents sign off on this or not. As soon as I turn 18, I'm jumping in. Unless they want to sign on the dotted line, then I'll jump in at 17.
What drew you into the Marine Corps? What was it, something that you had known you wanted to do before high school, or what made you make that decision?
Yeah, the interesting part is there's no other way to really put it. I mean, I could belabor you with story after story, and not even belabor you, but fascinate you even with story after story of how God created me to be. I've always had a really high um, need for justice, and
Hmm.
I just always hated strong people preying on the weak. I had a proclivity for nerds and dorks and stuff like that, just because I thought, why are people making fun of them just because they, I don't know, they like weird games or they read books instead
Hmm.
of play sports or whatever.
It leads
So
to a
it was
comfort zone
always
for them. I hate to cut you off there, but I was a
no,
person,
yeah.
even as a football player, when I wasn't the football player, I was the isolated kid. I was the kid that was kind of getting bullied, and being bullied isn't necessarily just physical. Being bullied is actually mental. Like,
Oh,
call,
that's right.
that's
Yeah.
just ass one. That's just, so many things. And I would love to tell you listeners that I would, get into the adult world and everything changes. It is not like that. There's a lot of adults who still
Oh, yeah.
have that mindset of staying in the comfort zone. So I love the fact that you hate seeing people preying on the easy targets, but when you
Mhm.
are an easy target at the same time, you're doing something special. People talking about you, that means you're doing
That's right.
something right. So, you
Yeah,
got to go in
absolutely.
early today, my man. So go ahead.
No, yeah, no, that I mean that's all you hit it. I mean that's so true. And so for me it was like, well, what greater way to do this? And obviously in my romantic youth, you romanticize all of the, kill the dragon, get the girl type scenario.
Hmm.
I thought, well, what other service would I go into but the Marine Corps? I heard it was the hardest, the most challenging, and the most likely to end up having to fight.
Hmm.
Now, that's all politics aside. That's romantic vision. I'm not trying to, set some political agenda or anything like that. That's clearly from the eyes of a young man,
Hmm.
a young boy to a young man, seeing the necessity of the warrior to protect women, to protect children, and to protect those that cannot protect themselves. And that was the great gravitas. That was a great calling into the Marine Corps. And so when I went out for football and went out for wrestling, and I was like, obviously you're not going to break. I knew that I wasn't going to break, playing soccer and playing hockey.
Hmm.
But it's like, man, if I can do this, then I can definitely do that. I'll just train a little bit harder, work a little bit harder. Interesting story. I joined the Marine Corps and I actually got out of shape in the Marine Corps. That's how in shape I got before I joined the Marine Corps,
Wow.
which I know sounds ridiculous and sounds like, oh no, he's lying. No, I'm telling you, I gained 20 pounds in boot camp, which is the opposite of most people's story, but I was a twig too. So I'll take that. And, that's how much I was running and doing push-ups and lifting and all of that stuff before I went in
Hmm.
to the Marine Corps. And obviously out of boot camp, I've started doing my own regimen again, and then found units and found men that were like way higher level than I was. I was like,
Right.
okay, these are the units that I want to rub elbows with and be a
I
part
got
of.
you. So while you were in there, you mentioned like the romantic vision that you had for it.
Mhm.
When you were there, what was the actual experience like?
Yeah, it's interesting. I explained this to somebody the other day, and this is obviously caricaturing it, so bear with me a little bit, but it is humorous. I was like, so basically, the military is 95% waiting around for the 5% to happen. If you're lucky, you get a
Hmm.
5% action, right? 5% romantic vision,
Yeah.
and that's including training. That's including, and I went to combat, so that's including combat, right?
Hmm.
And I had sort of the best case scenario, I got to train for 3.5 years with the Marine Corps in 29 Palms, which is the desert of all deserts,
Hmm.
but lots of training, high training tempo, and then went into the theater, went into Iraq, and then actually was in combat
Right.
as a Marine infantryman,
And
day in, day
you were
out.
actually leader. You were leading men into leading
That's right.
into battles, right?
That's
So
correct. Yeah.
what was that like? Because I don't compare myself to actually going to war, but being a
Mhm.
captain on multiple football teams and being voted captain, I kind of know the feeling of your peers looking up to you. Even though they're
That's
the
right.
people that are your same age, and just having that responsibility. Obviously, while I was playing a game, your life and death situation. So, what did that do to you, knowing that these men are trusting you with their life? Like you're someone that was trusted. How did that? I'm sure it still affects you to this very day, even in the fatherhood and being a husband and things like that.
Yeah, I pity those that take all of the freedoms of leadership and leave all of the responsibility.
Hmm.
Um, it's there's something about, they say heavy lies the crown, right? And
It's the head
there's a
that
lot
wears
of
the crown. Yeah.
cliched,
Yeah.
yeah, there's a lot of cliched kind of, but it's true. There's a heavy burden to bear as a leader, because at the end of the day, whether you did it or not, it was your responsibility.
Hmm.
It was your responsibility to train them. It was your responsibility to parent your children. It was your responsibility to, water your wife with the word,
Hmm.
to love her in a sacrificial love like Christ loves the church.
Hmm.
This is your responsibility to do. And
Hmm.
and now, obviously, in Christ we can do all things, but this is me pre salvation.
Hmm.
And so it was even heavier for me. And I'll be honest. I mean, I was very hard to work for. because I expected only the highest standard, and I constantly tested it. You inspect what you expect. So
Mhm.
constantly inspecting it and then constantly pushing to get more and more and more. But the interesting part was as soon as combat came around, I gathered my small group of men that I was in charge of, and I said, hey guys, the pressure's off now.
Mhm.
You will get no more pressure from me, but
Mhm.
all of the pressure will come from this life and death scenario that we are confronted with. So
Right.
I will no longer yell at you. I mean, unless they fell asleep on watch or did something totally ridiculous, of
Yeah.
course.
Yeah.
But it's like, I will no longer yell at you. I will no longer, put you through the physical crucible that you've been going through and that I got put through as well. And I appreciate my NCOs for putting me through that
Yeah.
and being that example. Those are the things that I can glean from the Marine Corps and take into real life and go, yeah, we need to put ourselves in scenarios like football,
Mhm.
where it's like, yeah, it's not life or death, but your whole goal is to win.
Mhm.
And there is a great cost that you must pay in training, in practice,
Mhm.
before the game and in the game to get that W, right?
Yeah.
Unless it's just a blowover team, but then
Right.
there's no glory in that, right? It's just
Yeah. Yeah.
you crush them and whatever.
Exactly. Yeah.
So yeah,
So one of the things, and I'm glad you mentioned the importance of leadership because the person that runs away from these responsibilities, I actually wanted when I got into coaching, one of the books that was recommended to me by a coach was Flags of Our Fathers. I believe it's
mm,
James Bradfield, I believe the name is. And again, there's so many similarities, and this isn't just a football thing, but this is just how you develop as men and the journey that you go on and the responsibility and the expectation that you need to be setting yourself up as men. And you mentioned that you were a hard leader to work for. And I always say, look, there's no other way to do it. You got to be an asshole.
yeah,
You cannot go from being nice and then all of a sudden be an asshole when it's time for combat. You got to
that's
only
right.
be an asshole. And then when game time comes, like even my college coach, Coach P, he would be screaming every practice. I saw him in the game one time, calm, peace. It's just, you
Yeah,
guys just go play. And that is it's such a huge lesson that I pity the person that doesn't get to experience that. But
yeah,
so you left, and did you just jump right into fitness? You had mentioned that there was a lot of things that went on there that before you met your wife, before you met had your kids, that you had
mhm,
lived through some times, man. So, you
yeah.
feel free to go ahead and kind of share about your journey from then to, now where you're family man and you seem like you're a little more reserved. You're
Yeah,
a little more calm now. So
yeah, that's true. I'm still a little bit high strung, but
yeah, I
not
know it. I
near
know it's
the
in there.
level.
It's there in you. So, but you
Yeah.
learn how to control it a little bit.
That's right. That's right. Well, and I ought to give grace because an overabundance of grace was given to me,
Yeah,
clearly, because I know my past. I know how
yeah,
bad my thoughts were and my actions were and my
right.
words were. But when you pray a prayer like I did, because I really did want to know the deeper whys, like why do we exist? Why is there something rather than nothing? What is our purpose here on
Mhm.
this planet? And you pray that right before combat and you say, God, if you're real, you're going to kill me. And then you don't die. And then you say, oh, well, God doesn't exist. Is that was my mindset, right?
Yeah,
That was my paradigm shift. And then you start to spiral down in that nihilistic belief of nothing. Like I didn't believe in meaning. I didn't believe in purpose. I didn't believe in values. I was like, I'll just pretend with everybody else
mm,
that there is such a thing as values, that there is such a thing as truth and goodness and beauty. But deep down in my soul, I didn't really believe that, except I still
mm,
couldn't shake that morality piece, which was watching somebody strong prey on somebody weak. It still just
mm,
got to me like sand in your sleeve that's rubbing in your
yeah,
elbow and
right,
you can't get it out.
right.
And so then I went chasing after, figuring that out. But I'll tell you, in that nihilistic spiral, when my wife and we call those our dark days. I was the worst. I imagine somebody that's pretending that there's such a thing as truth and goodness and law and all these
Mm,
things, and yet in their heart of hearts doesn't actually believe it. um, there's no telling what you can do with that. I mean, greed, power, money, fame, you can chase all of these things for all of the wrong reasons and
right.
just poison every well that you end up at,
Mm,
right? And I lost friendships and I lost relationships, and I have since had to apologize to more people than I can count,
Mhm.
than I can fathom, because I realized the travesty of that is that no, there is such a thing as truth and goodness and beauty. And that is what we are seeing around us. And it's undeniable. And God did create this. And even more, I've been forgiven of
Right.
the things that I don't deserve to be forgiven for.
Mhm.
And so how much more than I spent a long time and a lot of time meeting up with people face to face or calling them on the phone and just saying, hey, I'm sorry, please forgive me for objectifying you, or for treating you as a means to an end, or
Mhm.
for trying to use you and abuse you in the same way that I despised when I watched other people do that. It's
Yeah.
like, no, I became the thing that I hated.
You didn't want to become. And
Yeah.
so when you're going through this spiral,
Mm.
so many people, and this is again for you listeners as well. So many people, when they're going through these difficult times, we tend, and I've had similar situations too. We tend to cover it up. We tend to
That's right.
kind of put on a mask and things like
Mhm.
that. Can you speak a little bit to that? Because I think it's important for people to understand that when they know somebody is also going through it,
Mm.
they become more willing to share their truth, and it gets them out of that place a whole lot sooner. Like
Yeah.
you had mentioned a lot of the women that you objectified. You had mentioned the friendship, the relationships, and so many things, but they're kids now, so especially that are probably listening to the show, that feel like they're untouchable. They have
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
likes and the Instagram, and they're looking good, they're feeling good. They feel like they are untouchable. So can you speak to them a little bit in terms of how do you pull yourself out of that and
Mm.
don't send the representative and stuff like that?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, yeah. So I think first and foremost, we're going to continually try to justify our
Behavior.
existence and what it is that we do, right? So if I'm doing bad things, I'm going to figure out ways to jump through hoops and to play the circus games that I need to play, mentally, to be the good person, or to be the good leader or whatever. But at the end of the day, you have to look at yourself in the mirror, or in the morning, you have to look at yourself in the mirror. And I'm telling you right now, you are lying to yourself while you are also lying to other people. And the thing is, that darkness that we hide, it doesn't get smaller when you manipulate or justify or figure out a way so that you don't have to actually feel the pain of it.
Mm-hmm.
What happens is it actually gets bigger. It gets darker, it gets more gross, it gets bigger, and it gets harder and harder and harder to hold.
Yeah.
And I think that's why, this is real talk. I think that's why there's a lot of men that get out of the military, my friends included, that end up killing themselves, because what they don't do is the very thing that we don't want to do, but we need to do, and that's shine the light on it. The darkness doesn't get brighter when you keep it in the dark. It only gets brighter when you shine the light on it, which means you have to confess all of it, bring it all to bear. And if right now, if I remembered something from 20 years ago that I did that was wrong, it's like, okay, I'm going to bring that to the light too. And at least I'm going to confess that to God. If I can find the person and make amends, then I'm going to do that as well. But you have to bring that to the light, because otherwise, now that little darkness is going to control you. You think that you're in charge, but no, it's your sin, it's your darkness that's actually controlling you. And because you have to justify and lie, it's like a lie doesn't become less of a lie. A lie always becomes more of a lie, right? You got to figure out another way to say it, another way to adjust what you're saying and what you're doing to cover up that lie. And then that's another lie, and then that's another lie.
Right.
And while they seem small, after a while they build up and they become unbearable. And
Right.
so yeah, shine a light into it. Confess it to a friend that you trust, that you love, that you trust, that loves you, and say, "Hey, man, and test it.
Right.
Confess one thing, like say one thing that you know is rotten and wrong, and you want it to be pure, and you want to let it go."
Mm-hmm.
Right? Confess that, and I'll say, so the hardest thing for me to do was, in my childhood, I was sexually abused. What was to forgive that person, because much like that darkness, right? Me not forgiving him is me trying to control his pain. So I'm trying to punish him
Mm-hmm.
by drinking the poison that I'm thinking that he's imbibing. But it's like, no, I'm drinking that poison. I'm holding on to it. And by me holding on to it, I'm holding on to that darkness. I'm holding on to that. But once I forgive him and I say, hey, uh, you were brought up wrong, or whatever the case was, that you decided to do this horrible thing to me,
Mm,
I'm going to give that back to you because I don't want to hold on to this anymore. Because if I hold on to it, now it's going to control me. Now I'm going to think about all that and I become a victim. If you're a victim, you cannot actually take actionable steps
mm,
forward. You can only play that victim role. Oh, I'm too hurt. I'm too this. I can't, whatever. And it's like, once I gave that to him,
mhm.
man, it was like this weight was lifted. And then I had to keep doing it because it would keep coming up and I would keep wishing ill on him and, wanting to, again, drink that poison. But that's a good example of what it was that I was doing as well, by asking people for my forgiveness. Now, whether they gave me or not, right, that's up to them.
Right.
But now it no longer controls me. That darkness is not, I'm not slave to sin. I'm not slave to darkness. I'm not
Mm.
slave to the thing that happened to me. I can learn from my past, but relinquish it. And now I can move forward and be free for the first time ever. Right.
Yes. Well, I definitely, I can't tell you how much I appreciate your vulnerability and being willing to share that. We actually had a previous guest, her name is Donna, who went through a similar situation and she got pregnant at 14. And
Mm,
I haven't been sexually assaulted, but I've been bullied by adults, been physically draped up steps, slammed against the wall. And I asked her from a really tough place, how do you forgive? How do you forgive?
yeah.
Because the question, and I've even had when as a pastor, I got really close with, like when I first got out here in Florida, I asked them, how do you forgive without forgetting? And Donna made it very clear, and it's on camera. The episode isn't out yet, but it'll be out soon. She says, no one said you have to forget. No one
Yeah.
said you have to forget it all, but you got to
Yeah.
stop drinking that poison. You got to stop
Yeah.
drinking. I'm talking to you. Listen, you got to stop giving that
Yeah.
that person. I wanted to use a different word, but you got to stop giving that person the power over you, because
That's
that's
right.
not the power they deserve. When you stop
That's
drinking
right.
that poison and you're able to, again, I'm reserved, just like I told you, reserved kid, played football, was not the kid that deserved that at all. I'm sure no kid deserves to go through that kind of shit.
No.
If you keep giving them that poison, if you keep giving it to them by not forgiving, then you can't do the things you're doing now. You can't build
Yeah.
the leadership organization that you've built now. So, I'd love for you to just kind of walk us through the moment in which you kind of felt like you broke free. Where was that breakthrough
Mm,
moment for you? And I'll give you an example. It was something just maybe 4 or 5 months ago. I still was struggling to this day, was pornography. And
mhm,
I've been porn free for maybe close to about 4 or 5 months now. And it was actually
mhm,
listening to a current pastor, former athlete, on a podcast, and I listened to how bad, how damaging the whole thing made his life. That made me say,
mm,
man, has a podcast, does a lot of the work I'm doing. I'm like, that's a
mhm.
former athlete. That could have been me. And if I'm given to that, then I'm ruining society, even though I may just be watching, quote unquote. Again, we're football guys.
Mhm.
We used to have this shit playing in the locker room. We did
Yeah.
not think it was a bad thing at all.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
Yeah.
when someone tried to tell me that porn was a bad thing, I'm like, I'm celibate, but still, come
Yeah.
on,
Yeah.
give me something, though. Like, it's not that, but
Yeah.
I officially have stopped doing it, and the weight's lifted off. And I tell people all the
Mm,
time, it just isn't worth it. So, kind of walk us through some of
yeah.
the moments, or I guess the weeks leading up to your breakthrough, and how you were able to
Yeah.
do that and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So, from the nihilism, right, I needed to find the reason why behind what I was noticing, which is strong people preying on weak, and why I thought so strongly that that's immoral. Because if there is no value, if there's no meaning, if there's no purpose, then I shouldn't feel these feelings, right? And so I just thought, oh, I need to, I just tried to ignore it, couldn't ignore it. And so
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to jump in to figure out the reason why. And I was like, but I'm not going to go Christian because, I started in a charismatic church and then ended up Roman Catholic, kind of a weird childhood, totally two ends of the spectrum, whatever.
Oh,
But I was
if
like,
we
nah,
start talking religion here, the rules and religion, that's another thing we kind of touched on with, I mean, we'll be on here for another couple hours. It's a
yeah,
relationship with God, folks. Prayer is a conversation with God.
that's
The
right.
religion and the rules, they're there as guardrails, so they start creating
Yep.
excuses to judge people and things like that. You know, you might bring
Yeah.
past the asthma might come out on you real quick.
Yeah, that's right. Well,
So
so
it's
yeah,
like,
and so I jumped into all these like Hinduism and Buddhism
yeah.
and so every religion that I would go into, I would get the book, I would get a like a spiritual mentor or a guru or whatever, and then I would go to their ashrams if they had it, and I would practice whatever they told me to practice. So like self-realization fellowship, I was meditating 2 to 4 hours every single day, read Bhagavad Gita, read autobiography of a
Wow.
yogi, got a spiritual mentor, went to all their ashrams, right? All this stuff. But all of them, they were always like a few questions away from just logical absurdity. Like, well, that doesn't make sense.
Huh.
And so I was like, okay, last ditch effort. I'm going to try Christianity. And I'm going to do it the same way. I read the Bible cover to cover.
Mm-hmm.
I joined a men's group. I got a pastor who was my mentor, walking me through,
Yeah, I
asking me.
did that
This
too.
man was incredible, Ian Stevenson, just asking the best questions and making me spin for days, right, on these questions. And
Yeah.
and then I went to church every single Sunday. So it's like that's what I did, and I did it for like a year and a half. And I
Mm.
remember we were sitting in a Starbucks, May 21st, 2009, and he's like, Aaron, I love that you're wrestling with this. I love that you're giving all of this effort. I love that you're pouring your heart into really figuring out why, there's such a thing as good and bad, and why there is there truth, or is it just relative,
Mhm.
all of these things. He's like, but I can't help but notice you're trying to control all of it.
Mhm.
Why don't you let go and give your life to God?
Hmm.
And I was like, bam, it just hit me hard. And I was like, okay, this is it. I mean, if that is the why behind all of it,
Right.
you're my, I submit my life to you, God. I'm giving my whole life to you. I don't know what that looks like.
Right.
And most people are like, and then I got all these blessings, and every life was great after that, and joy and blah. And me, it was the exact opposite. It was during 2008, 2009. I
Mhm.
lost 75% of my business because the real estate bubble popped. It was a fitness company.
Mhm.
75% of my business, what felt like overnight, it was like in a couple of months. I
Mhm.
lost every single friend because I didn't have friends at the church that I was going to yet. I had some men that I would go to the men's group with,
Right.
but no friends really. Every single female interest, right, that I was most of them objectifying and all of that, all of those are gone because I every other page I felt like I read sexual immorality, and I was like, okay, can't
Yeah.
go there.
Right.
That all stopped. I lost like 30 pounds of muscle. I had a really strong widow's peak of hair. I literally lost it what it felt like overnight.
Mhm.
So from all outside perspective, I was unsuccessful. I was a failure,
Mhm.
right? All of the worldly metrics, I was losing. And it
Yeah.
was the first time I felt contentment in my entire life. And I was like, if this is it, I will do this for the rest of my life. This, this is exactly the question, the prayer that I was praying in combat, the questions that I had as a youth, the questions that I had that I was searching, for the answer in all these other religions for.
Mhm.
And it was through my relationship with Jesus Christ,
Yeah.
obedience to him, submission to him for the first time in my life ever.
That's amazing, and I'm glad you shared it so eloquently because, as myself, listeners got to understand when you have nothing, you can receive everything. At the state of having nothing, I mean the material things, the money, the businesses, the car, all the stuff that the world uses to give you value, strip it all away, get it all off your chest, and then you're just bare naked. You're just all you have is you. It's those moments that actually define you. It's those moments where you're able to prove it to yourself that you're going to be able to do whatever it is you're trying to do, not because you're by yourself, but because you have one person and one person to look to, and that's God, that's your savior. You got to get to that place. You cannot get in the habit of depending on other people like human flesh because we're all going to make mistakes, and you can't
Mm-hmm.
get the habit of depending on a material thing to validate your worth. It is
That's
an
right.
ugly, ugly, ugly place to live. I see people I'm in Florida. I'm in West Palm Beach, Florida. I see it
That's
every
all day,
single
every day.
day. Okay. It's rampant. There's a ton of money. I mean, and the way they are, like the mindset a lot of them have is like they can have all the money in the world and they completely are unhappy and they don't know what to do with it. Please, please, please hear me from my heart when I tell you this. Don't let that be you. And I do want to give you the opportunity to now, with all that being said, to speak on your company, Leaders versus Leaders, because I know you
Yep.
do some things with the kids, and I know there's ways which you, and I'm honestly curious, just even from a perspective of someone that works with kids, is how do you gauge kids in this activity? Because I know for a fact, talking to my 15-year-old self or my school self would have heard this and been like, come on, man, but my girl she's got, she's got some, like I would have been, but the older me gets it. But I'm thinking back to my 15-year-old self, and I'm curious how do you gauge the young people in this kind of conversation, just to keep them interested?
Yeah, well, so first of all, so I went and spoke and taught leadership and leadership development to a bunch of youth at it was the rodeo crowd, so it was a steer riding camp, and so this Canada's best bull rider, Dakota Butter, he teaches the skills part of it. I'm not a bull rider, and but I get to teach the leadership portion of it. And the beauty is there's kids there that are like that. They're kind of totally in the world. They're all about the buckle. They're all about the best ride. They're all about looking the coolest, being the toughest, all of this stuff. And then there's kids there that they're sold out for the Lord. I mean, they are totally just all of my life to all of Christ for the rest of my life. And so having those conversations, obviously the child that's already a Christian, or the young kid or the young boy or the young man that's already a Christian, you can use those words, right? You can talk to him, hey, grab him by the baptism, right? So to speak, and be like, no, you're baptized into the body of Jesus Christ. And every time that you're sinning, now here's the thing. You're able to confess, but if you're making conscious choices to continue to sin again and again, you keep hanging Jesus Christ on the cross. You keep having him suffer the wrath of the scourges and whips, and that that's not right. But the kid who's like all about the buckle and all about the fame, we're having conversations like old me. It's like, well, do you think that there's, why is there something rather than nothing? And so we're starting from just, do you even believe in the possibility of God? And then if you believe in the possibility of God, now let's walk into, so why is that a possibility? And I do believe that, in general revelation, natural revelation, right? That nature screams out the glory of God. Like it's undeniable. But that doesn't mean that we don't try to deny it, right? I was in that boat. I tried to deny it. And I was going after all sorts of things that made me feel good. But the problem is you can get into that feel good cycle. And then before you know it, you're trying to scroll TikTok to try to find the bottom of it. And there is no bottom, and you're never going to be satisfied. Well, because satisfaction isn't going to be found in lust, in sex, in all of these. There is a bit of truth. Satan does this. He makes a little hook. And that little hook, he puts a little bait on there that's a little bit of truth. And then you bite that hook, and then he pulls you into desolation and despair. Wow. Right. And so then I get to have these conversations with these kids. It's like, look, it seems really cool and it feels really good because that's how God designed it. But then you get pulled into despair because now you're chasing after more and more and more and more and more of that. And that's not how the cosmos were created. That's not how God designed it. And then you wonder why you feel alone and scared and insecure. It's because you did it wrong, homie. You bit the bait and you got pulled into desolation and despair. Yeah.
And as you're talking, I mean, because I was with my high school girlfriend for 4 years, and to be honest with you, Aaron, we wouldn't even been friends. We shouldn't even have been together as just
That's
friends.
Right.
But again, she was willing to put out and all that kind of stuff. And I remember my senior year, I was doing my driving test, and the guy asked me, "You have a girlfriend?" I'm like, "Yeah, I do." He looks at me, he goes, "I can tell you've had that girlfriend for a long time." So to you young guys, man, just because she's putting it out there, other men who've been through that, they can feel it on you, and you've been pulled in that hook. You'll be
Yeah.
drained. You won't have the feeling of, all right, I'm filled with something new and positive, and the energy will just
Yeah.
simply be drained. And you actually, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, you actually have a program. It's called Rites of Passage that you put people through. Feel
That's
free to
right.
speak on that a little bit.
Yeah, and so the sort of the cornerstone
Mhm,
of leaders and discipled, past tense, discipled in Christ is the app. It's for free on Android or iPhone.
mhm,
And 100 in His Strength is the discipleship course, which is kind of the cornerstone course. So it's 100 days. I understand that humans, we are designed to enjoy habit, take habits, turn them into routines, take routines, and then that becomes our lifestyle. And
mhm.
then we can commit those lifestyles to Christ and feel that fulfillment and
Right.
contentment that comes from that. And so it's 30 days to make it a habit, and then the next 30 days is a routine. The next 30 days is to take that routine, turn it into a lifestyle, and the last 10 days is committing that lifestyle to Christ. That's the discipleship part. But for
Mhm,
children, we have, like you just said, the driving test. We have all these like really crappy rituals, rites of
mhm.
passage. I turn 18, I can buy a smut magazine, I can
Yeah.
buy
Everybody,
cigarettes. Well,
yeah,
now I
yeah,
think
yeah,
it's
yeah.
21 or whatever. It's like I barely made it through high school, but I get this diploma,
Mhm.
whatever, or I barely tried and I get this diploma.
Right.
Um, every once in a while we come upon something that's difficult, that's challenging, that's worthy of our effort.
Mhm.
And those are the things that make memories. Those are the things that we talk about. And so for you, like football,
Mhm.
for me, the Marine Corps and
Right.
some other things in my obviously my journey with the Lord.
Mhm.
And so those are the things that we want to share because they were true adventures. Which what is the adventure? It's something challenging. You
Mhm.
risk failure, like you can actually fail,
Yeah.
and you have to put all of your effort into it in order to actually achieve it. And
Mhm.
then it means something to you. You get to hold that for the rest of your life. And
Mhm.
so I designed this because basically we pulled our kids out of school because during COVID they were trying to teach them with screens, and I was like, no, we're not going to do that.
Hmm.
And so I had to become a private school, my own private school, my own principal.
Oh, like
And so I
home,
designed our
you homeschool the kids?
yeah, so we
Oh,
homeschool.
nice.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, and so it started to make me think, which, kind of feel like an idiot. It's like, well, okay, parent, you should have already thought about this, but this is normal. This is like normal societal action and inaction, right? That happens with all of us. And
Mhm.
I started to think, man, what do I want for my kids? What do I want from my children? What do
Right.
I want from my children's children?
Mhm.
And how can I help them embrace that and really own that? And it
Mhm.
was like, well, I'm going to create these rites of passage. And so I
Right.
did a 12-year-old rite of passage, a 16-year-old, 18-year-old rite of passage.
Mhm.
And the 12-year-old is like a 5-day ordeal. I mean, they're doing all sorts of physical things, mental things, spiritual things, that I actually have to be consistent in training my children in the
Mhm.
way in which they should go,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
And or raising my kids up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord, right? In order for her, in order for my daughter Hannah, or in order for my daughter Ellie, or my son Jack,
Mhm.
or my new daughter Frances to be able to pass it. So it
Right.
actually held me parents accountable. And so
Mhm.
this rite of passage is actually more about holding parents accountable to being parents,
Mhm.
so that their children can hang their hat on something that
Mhm.
is incredibly challenging, incredibly adventurous,
Mhm.
runs the risk of failure.
Mhm.
Um, and then when they've earned it, they've earned something more than just, all right, atta girl. Okay, now you're 12. Okay, now you're 16. It's no, you've earned these freedoms. You've earned these responsibilities. You are no longer a child. I will never call you a child again. Our
Right.
community will come around and affirm that. We will never call you a child again. You are now an adolescent. You have earned that. You've
Mhm.
earned every bit of that. And it's just awesome to watch my daughter Hannah. She just accomplished this
Yeah,
not
that
too long
actually
ago.
that's what I was gonna ask you. Like, what have the results been? Any parent, if there's any parents listening in, how they can, engage with you when it comes to that. So,
Yeah, and so I don't expect parents. I've talked to a lot of parents now and help them design their own rites of passage. And so obviously I kind of talked through, these are the principal things there needs to be in there.
hmm
You don't need to do all of the things that I did.
hmm
But you could pull that and I don't consider it plagiarism. I consider it passing on the torch
Right, right.
of truly earning something that's worthy to be earned,
Mhm.
and will actually glorify God
Yeah,
by your child no longer being a child and being an adolescent. And
right.
they'll be better off for it. You'll be a better parent for it, and you'll
Mhm.
have a healthier, happier, more contented household because of it as well. And
Right.
so, yeah, like now, I have no problem. Hannah can go on her own. She can go off and do stuff. And I'm not worried about her. I mean, mom still worries, but that's what moms do.
Yes, yes.
Uh,
That's a
but
good
I no
point.
longer worry about her. She's strong enough. She's got really, she understands baselines and anomalies. Like she can see if
Mhm.
bad man is doing bad things. I'm gonna
Exactly.
create space and time. I'm gonna go a different direction.
Yes.
We literally she showed how to do a tourniquet, how to do CPR, AED, how to splint a bone, how to do C spine stabilization. The next day,
Hmm.
we got into a head-on collision, and what it did was that, and obviously I did not try to make that part of the rite of passage.
No, no,
That
she
was
did not.
God's
You did
hand in
not
it,
know.
right?
Right, right.
But she realized
Mhm.
how important all of those things that she just demonstrated the effectiveness of
Right.
the day before were, because I was doing C-spine on a lady, and we almost had to do CPR on her. And there, I mean, it was chaos, but it was like she could watch dad be cool, calm, collected, do what needed to be done to
Right.
save lives, right? And then we were both fine. God's hand was on us. We're
Yes.
totally fine. And so then we went on a 5 mile run, which is
Yeah.
what we planned on doing anyways that day. So
That's amazing, man. So if people want to work with you, where do you see the organization growing? What can you kind of tell people what's next and how they can, just get involved in some way, shape, form, or fashion? Because pretty personally, I teach at a school that
mhm.
the majority of the kids are being raised in broken homes, and their
Okay.
parents, there's some that are trying, man. They really
Mhm.
are genuinely trying, but their lack of resources, their inability, sometimes they just feel helpless. So can you just kind
Mhm.
of speak on what's next and how they can work with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So they can hop on, they can download that app,
Yeah.
Discipled in Christ. They can go through the course. There's a rite of passage course where I explain all of this stuff in great detail. They can see specifically the curriculum that I used, right, to bring my daughter through it. And then I'm bringing my family through. And then, yeah, if they want to, they can reach out to me. I'll connect with them probably if they jump on
Mm-hmm.
Discipled in Christ. Um, Typically that's the easiest way to get a hold of me. And then they can ask me a bunch of questions. And then if they want coaching, I'll carve that out. We can have that discussion. But my whole goal in it was it's going to be donor funded, and I'm going to just put everything
Mm-hmm.
out there, and I'm going to put it all out there for free, and I'm going to do it to the glory of God. And I want to see families, broken homes,
Yeah.
be healed in Christ, and then do incredible things, the incredible things that we all have unfulfilled potential, right? And it is just something beautiful to see somebody starting to fulfill their potential. Watch them, grow into those big shoes that
Yeah.
they put on, right? That whether it's rite of passage or
Right.
discipleship or whatever path they ended up taking.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, any step of the way, every step of the way, I can be there. Or hey, I'll just give you a couple pointers, whatever the case might be. If they
So
want me to speak or
what does your coaching entail? Are you going back to the fitness stuff, or is it just kind of coaching them on how to work through the leadership development?
no, it's all leadership development. It's establishing that Christ is Lord of leadership.
Mhm.
And if he's Lord of leadership, we can look to him, and we can emulate that and see incredible change, not only for ourselves, but all of our spheres of influence.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, I'll do speaking gigs. I'll do trainings like I did for the steer riding, put
Right.
together a curriculum
Mhm.
specific to, and I've done steer riding, and I've done mountain, like Men of the Mountain stuff. And I've done
Mhm.
a bunch of different types of events, commando course.
Right.
I was a part of something called the Special Forces Experience. And then that's what I do for the Marine Corps Reserves all the time. So I've worked with
Okay.
3-letter agencies and all of that. And so I love to sit down with, somebody who has a vision, and it's like,
Yes.
hey, let's chop out an event
Finding
that's
right.
going to change people's paradigms, right? Shift
Yeah.
their paradigms and get them to start taking steps in the right direction. And
Yeah.
then if they need to, I think the important part is that follow up. Like a lot of times, like we can have this cool tent revival moment,
Gotta
but
be.
then we come down off the mountain and then everybody just goes back to normal. It's like,
Yeah.
well, that ain't helping anybody,
That is the
you know.
key. I'm glad you mentioned that because you can get that sugar rush just like going to see a motivational speaker, just like
That's
going
right.
to church one time, but you got to take all of this at home and apply it to your day to day life, moment to moment, day to day, whatever it is you have to do. It's not going to do you any good to just do it once. All right. So
Mm-hmm.
very, very important that you take that home and take that into consideration as well, which is why this show comes out every single day. I don't want you just hearing it once and then drop it off. Nope, tune in every single day. There'll be a brand new episode. So
That's right.
all that being said, Aaron, the way I close out all the shows is I want you to use your imagination a little bit. Pretend you are back in high school. Pretend that young high school version of Aaron has come into the Zoom room where he's struggling with insecurity. He is just hates the way that bullies push younger people around, the whole thing. Pretend that boy is here, give him some words of encouragement, and we'll officially close.
Yeah. I mean, basically, I would just go up to him and slap him in the face and be like, "You ain't gonna listen to me anyways, boy." But if he actually did listen to me,
Yes,
be
sir.
like,
Yes, sir.
I'd be
Sometimes
like,
the physical part actually works with us guys, stubborn guys. Yes.
that's right. But no, if he actually did listen to advice, I would say, hey, don't make this your last piece of advice that you actually listen to. There's going to be a ton of wise counsel that steps into your life. And I want you to actually not just listen to what they say, as the Bible says, right? Don't just read it, don't just hear it, but put it into action. Obey, listen, and obey. Like actually walk it out. And that's obviously I'm just parroting what you literally just got done saying. It's like you gotta put it into action every single day.
Right.
And if old me would have listened to me now, or young me listen to old me, I probably wouldn't have the story that I have now. I wouldn't have the deep, dark depths, which I don't think it's a bad thing. There is beautiful glory in a boring testimony.
Yeah.
There
Yes.
is something amazing about that. Like, man, that would be awesome. Obviously that is not my story. That's not how it was written, and I'm okay with that. But yeah, man, if I could, that's what I would.
Yeah, one of my first few episodes was there was a girl who told me to read the book The Gift of Imperfection by Brene Brown. So, it is actually a gift. Being imperfect is actually the gift. See the beauty in your imperfections, and things will work out. You just got to stay focused. So, all that being said, fellow teammates, continue to move swiftly. We will talk more soon.